The dry season came early that year, and with it came the whispers. In the village of Umoji, where the red earth met the bend of the great river Ogu, the birds stopped singing before dawn, the goats grew restless, and the river itself began to fall quiet. Amara noticed it first. She was 16, thin-boned and quick-footed, with her mother's high cheekbones. Since childhood she had walked a mile to the riverbank every morning before sunrise, carrying a small woven basket with a handful of grain, kneeling at the water's edge to whisper the same words her mother had taught her. "Thank you for what you give. Thank you for what you allow. I ask for nothing but to belong to this place a little longer." Her mother, Adiz, had died 4 years earlier, taken by fever. Before she passed, she had pulled Amara close. "The river does not owe us anything," she whispered. "We do not feed it because we are afraid of it. We feed it because it has given us everything, and a grateful heart never goes hungry, even when the belly does." Amara had kept that promise every morning since, the only inheritance left from a mother she barely had time to know. The house of Ngozi. When Adiz died, Amara's father remarried within the year, a quiet necessity more than love. His new wife, Ngozi, arrived with 2 daughters, Kameka and Uzoamoko, both quick to remind Amara she was a guest in a house that used to be hers. Her father died 2 years later, his heart failing in the fields, and with him went the only shield Amara had against Ngozi's resentment. It was not outright cruelty, the village would have noticed that. It was smaller things. The oldest wrappers. The chores no one else wanted. A back room among sacks of cassava. And always, when Ngozi spoke of her to neighbors, a sigh and a shake of the head, "That girl talks to the river like it can hear her." Amara had learned there was no arguing with a woman who had already decided what story she wanted to tell. The drought begins. The maize curled brown at the edges. The cassava beds cracked. Then the river itself began shrinking back from its banks, revealing pale cracked mud where fish used to swim. The village elders gathered beneath the old Iroko tree, as they always did when trouble needed a name. Chief Priest Namdi, staff planted in the dirt, declared, "The river does not simply die. Something has offended it." Ngozi made sure a name surfaced quickly. "My husband's daughter," she said, voice trembling with practiced concern. "She goes to the river every morning, alone, before anyone wakes. She talks to it. Who knows what she says to the spirits in the dark?" A dying mother's gift, a girl's quiet grief and gratitude, became, in Ngozi's retelling, something sinister. And fear, once planted in dry soil, grows faster than any crop. The market square. Word reached its full weight on market day, the square crowded with traders already anxious about failing harvest, all hungry for someone to blame. Chief Priest Namdi found Amara near the cloth sellers. "Is it true you speak words to the river that no one else can hear?" "I go to give thanks," she said, voice smaller than she wanted. "My mother taught me. It has never been a curse. But truth rarely arrives in time to save anyone from a fear already given shape. The river was full when your mother lived," an old woman called. "It has been dying since you began going there alone." "Since she cursed it," Ngozi said, stepping forward, voice rising with theatrical grief. "I tried to guide her. But grief made her strange, and now look what has become of us." A stone landed in the dust near Amara's feet, thrown by a child at his mother's urging. Chief Priest Namdi raised his staff, and silence fell. "Until the water returns, this girl will not set foot within these walls. Let her go to the river she loves so much, and see if it loves her back. Not a trial. Not evidence. Fear dressed as judgment." Amara, often twice now, once by death, once by disownment, was cast out. The hut by the riverbank. She did not cry at first. There was too much to do. Kayameka and Uzomoko watched from the gate as she gathered what was hers, a sleeping mat, a clay pot, her mother's woven basket. Ngozi stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You should have been more careful, she said. Some things are better left unsaid, even to a river. Amara walked the familiar mile, but this time there was no home to return to. An abandoned fishing hut stood near the water's edge, half collapsed, and used for years. She swept it out, laid her mat in the corner, and watched the sun go down over a river now barely a trickle between cracked banks. For the first time since her mother died, she wept, not loudly, but deeply, the grief of years finally giving room. She wept for her mother, whose memory had become evidence against her. She wept for the home that had never quite been safe, and now was gone. When the weeping was done, she rose, took the basket, and knelt at the water's edge anyway. Thank you for what you give. Thank you for what you allow. I ask for nothing but to belong to this place a little longer. She did not do it because she believed the river was listening. She did it because it was the last thread connecting her to the person who had loved her most. The long weeks. The days bled into hunger and heat. Amara foraged bitter leaves, stubborn tubers the drought hadn't claimed, small fish trapped in shrinking pools. An old fisherman, Papa Choku, too elderly to care much for village gossip, would sometimes leave a portion of his catch near her hut before dawn, saying nothing. The village, only a mile away, felt like another world. She watched from a distance as the drought worsened, cassava beds turning to dust, goats growing listless, even the ancient Iroko tree shedding leaves out of season. Every morning, without fail, Amara walked to the water's edge and gave her offering, even as the grain grew scarce, even as there was less and less water to receive it. One evening, hollow with hunger, she asked the river a question she had never dared ask before. Why does it feel like giving thanks is the only thing I have left, when everyone else believes I have taken everything away? The river did not answer. But something in the asking loosened a knot in her chest. She was not performing the ritual for the village's forgiveness, nor even the river's favor. She was doing it because it was who she was, because grief, she was learning, does not disappear when you honor it. It simply becomes part of the shape you carry forward. The turning. It began with a sound. Amara woke before dawn to the low, murmuring music of moving water, a sound she hadn't heard in weeks. She ran barefoot to the bank and found water rising slowly along the bend nearest her hut, feeling the cracked earth like a wound closing. She knelt in the wet mud, laughing through tears, letting the water lap against her fingers. But the strangeness revealed itself fully when Papa Choku came hurrying along the bank. It is only here, he said, breathless. Beyond the stone marker, the riverbed is still bone dry. The water has returned only on your side, child. Word spread through Umoji within hours. Traders and farmers found, impossibly, a boundary in the river itself, water flowing freely past Amara's hut, and beyond the marker where the village's fields began, nothing but cracked earth still waiting. The village reacts. Chief Priest Namdi came himself, staring at the strange divide as though it might rearrange itself under his gaze. Old teachings were spoken again, with new weight. The river spirit did not respond to fear or obligation. Only to gratitude given freely, without expectation of reward. She fed the river even when she had nothing left to give, Papa Choku told anyone who would listen. Rain or drought. Whether anyone was watching or not. That is not a curse. That is the truest kind of faith. It was Uzomoko, Ngozi's own daughter, the quieter of the two stepsisters, who finally broke the story open. She went to the chief priest alone. My mother lied, she said, voice shaking. Amara never cursed anyone. She grieved her mother at the riverbank, quietly. My mother turned that grief into a story because she wanted her gone. I said nothing because I was afraid to. I should have spoken sooner. The chief priest looked out at the dry fields beyond the marker, at desperate farmers who had lost nearly everything, and understood, too late, what the village had done. The reckoning. Ngozi's exposure came publicly, in the same square. She denied it at first, her voice rising in the same practiced grief. But Uzomoko stood firm, And Kayameka, unable to meet her mother's eyes, admitted she too had known the truth and said nothing. The village that had thrown stones now turned its anger toward the woman who had built a lie out of grief and resentment. Ngozi was not banished, but she was made to stand before the entire village and admit what she had done. Shame, in a village where reputation was everything, was its own kind of exile. But the village needed more than punishment. It needed water. The fields beyond the Maka remained dry despite the river flowing so close, just beyond the boundary none of them understood. 3 days later, a delegation walked the mile to the riverbank hut, Chief Priest Namdi at its head, Papa Choku beside him, and behind them, a line of villagers who had once turned their faces away. They found Amara kneeling at the water's edge, exactly where she had knelt every morning, scattering the last of her grain across water that no longer needed her offering, but that she gave anyway. Amara, the chief priest said, his thunderous voice carrying something like humility now. We have wronged you. I judged before I understood, and let fear speak louder than fairness. Will you help us? Will you show us what you know? The choice. Amara looked at the crowd, the same faces that had spat at her feet, thrown stones, turned away in the market square. She looked at Ngozi, unable to meet her eyes. She looked at Papa Choku, who had never once doubted her, and at Uzomoko, whose courage had cracked the truth open. There was a version of this moment where she turned them away. No one would have blamed her. But her mother's voice rose in her again, steady as ever. We do not feed it because we are afraid of it. We feed it because it has given us everything. She rose, wiped the mud from her knees, and looked at the crowd, not with triumph, but with weariness and grace. I will show you, she said. Not because you deserve it, but because this was never mine to keep from you. The ritual shared. She led them to the bank, showed them the basket, the grain, her mother's words, not as instructions, but as a beginning. It is not the words, she told them, as farmers and children knelt awkwardly at the water's edge. It is not even the grain. Give thanks because you mean it. Not because you fear what happens if you don't. Nothing happened at first, and doubt flickered across older faces wanting a quick miracle. But Amara did not stop. She led them back the next morning, and the morning after, teaching patience alongside gratitude. On the 4th morning, the water began to move past the stone marker. Slowly at first, a trickle finding cracked earth, then a stream, then, by full sunrise, a steady flow spreading across ground dry for 2 months. Farmers wept openly. Children splashed in puddles that had seemed impossible days before. Homecoming. Ngozi never truly asked forgiveness. Amara did not wait for it. Some debts were not hers to collect. She was welcomed back, not with grand ceremony, but with something quieter, market women greeting her by name again, children who had once thrown stones now walking beside her, curious, asking to be shown the river's thanksgiving. Chief Priest Namdi offered her a place among the village elders. Amara declined, gently. I do not want a title. I only ever wanted to be believed. She did not move back into Ngozi's compound. With Papa Choku's help and a handful of villagers eager to make amends, she rebuilt the old fishing hut into something steadier, something fully hers. It was there, at the water's edge each morning, that she continued the ritual her mother had taught her, no longer alone, but often joined by a small gathering of children who had come to see the offering not as something strange, but something beautiful. The ending that was really a beginning. Years later, travelers passing through Omoji would sometimes ask about the custom they saw each morning at the riverbank, a young woman, often with children beside her, kneeling at the water's edge, whispering words too soft to fully hear. The villagers who remembered would tell the story the way stories are meant to be told, softened at the edges by time, but true in the ways that mattered most. A girl wrongly accused, cast into hunger and grief, who chose gratitude when the world gave her every reason to choose bitterness instead. A river that did not reward fear, but recognized the heart that gave without expecting anything in return.